This case takes place in Delhi, India, in the year 2022. Shraddha Walkar was born in 1995 in the Indian state of Maharashtra. She lived with her mother and brother in a simple home, while her father lived separately so he could run an electronics store. Despite the two parents living apart, Shraddha and her brother were raised in a strict Hindu environment. They were expected to study hard at school. Their parents' dream was for them to get college degrees and well-paying jobs so they could support their families in the future. Shraddha studied at a local convent school where she excelled academically. When she finished school, she was enrolled to study a Bachelor of Mass Media at the Viva Institute of Technology. But right around the time of her final exams, she unexpectedly dropped out. She decided that she wasn't really interested in studying, and she had only enrolled to please her parents. A few months before she dropped out of university, Shraddha got a job at a call center for a large multinational company in Malad. This gave her a taste of the independence she had craved ever since she could remember. Shraddha finally had her own money, and she could spend it however she liked. But there was something else she wanted as well. She wanted a relationship. By the time Shraddha dropped out of college, she was in her early 20s, which is right around the age her parents thought she would be getting married. They had already been looking for potential husbands they could arrange for her to marry. But Shraddha told them that she wanted to do things differently and to be able to choose who she would spend the rest of her life with. So, in an act of rebellion against her traditional parents, she downloaded the Bumble app. This is how Shraddha met Aftab Amin Poonalawa. Shraddha believed, or at least she wanted to believe, that Aftab was a good match and that they had a lot in common. Aftab was studying the same degree that she had, and they both worked at the same call center. The pair bonded over their shared dislike for the traditions of their two religions. Aftab was Muslim, and Shraddha was Hindu. Both faiths have strongly held traditions and strict cultural expectations which clashed with their own values. Shraddha finally felt that she had met a man who could understand where she was coming from, and she told her friends their connection was rare and unique. In mid-2019, Shraddha introduced her parents to her boyfriend for the first time, and then she dropped a bombshell. She was to be moving out of the family home to live with Aftab. Her parents disapproved of the plan, firstly because she was living with a man who she wasn't married to, and because Aftab was a Muslim. Shraddha's parents warned her against this, but their cautions fell on deaf ears. She told them she was 25 and was old enough to make her own decisions. She told her parents that they might as well not consider her to be their daughter anymore, and she left her family behind to start a new life with Aftab. However, before too long, the cracks in the relationship started to show. Shraddha's friends would later say that Aftab was quite controlling, while others would say that she put a lot of pressure on him to get married. Either way, within a couple of months, the pair decided to move from Mumbai to Delhi. They quit their jobs and moved all of their belongings to a rented apartment in the city so they could start the next chapter of their lives. While Shraddha looked like she was thriving in the big city, the gap between her and her parents only grew wider. They didn't communicate at all, except for sporadic updates through her brother. Then, in 2020, Shraddha's mother unexpectedly passed away from a brain hemorrhage. It was a devastating blow for the family, but there was one positive to come out of it. She finally reconnected with her father. She travelled home and stayed for 2 weeks to support her family, which is when she made a shocking confession. She told her father, Vikash, that Aftab had put his hands on her. It had gotten so bad that she had gone to stay with a friend for 3 days to get away from him. Vikash begged Shraddha to stay with him and to not return to Delhi, and she did consider the idea. But Aftab turned up and he begged her for her forgiveness, and he promised that he would never hurt her again. Shraddha believed him. She packed up her things and she returned to Delhi. Vikash would never see his daughter again. In early October of 2022, one of Shraddha's friends rang her brother, Srijay. This friend told Shraddha's brother that he had not heard from her in a number of months, and in that time, Her mobile phone had been turned off, and no one who knew her could get a hold of her. Shraddha's brother checked her social media accounts and noticed that she hadn't posted anything since May. Shraddha's father Vikash also realized that it had been more than 6 months since he had last heard from his daughter, and with this, he contacted the Mumbai police to report her missing. He told the officers that he suspected her new boyfriend was involved in some way because she had confessed that he was a violent partner. The Mumbai station requested that the Delhi police look into the matter, and they began looking into Shraddha's whereabouts. While Vikash waited for authorities to take action, he decided to visit Delhi for himself and to try and look for his daughter. When he went to the door of the couple's flat, he found a padlock which was locked from the outside. Vikash suspected that his daughter was locked inside the apartment, and he made a police report alleging that his daughter had been kidnapped or was being held against her will, although the truth was far more horrific than he could have ever imagined. On the 26th of October, Aftab was asked to come into the local station to answer questions about Shraddha's whereabouts. He gave a written statement to say that he had broken up with Shraddha in May and had no contact with her since. But the officers felt like something wasn't adding up. No one had heard from Shraddha, and her bank accounts and cell phones had been inactive for months. Although there was no evidence of foul play, so Aftab was released. But the officers did suspect something, so they decided to keep him under surveillance to observe him if he did anything suspicious. In the meantime, the police spoke to friends of the couple to find out if there was anything more to the breakup than Aftab was letting on. That's when they learned about a violent beating which had put Shraddha in the hospital for 3 days. Aftab had beaten her so viciously that she sustained multiple internal injuries. She had told the doctors the truth about what had happened, but they encouraged her to go home rather than seek help to escape her violent relationship. On the 10th of November, the officers brought Aftab back to the station for a face-to-face interview. This time, Aftab told them that he and Shraddha used to get into a lot of fights, which he blamed on her for being so desperate to get married. He said that on the 22nd of May they had gotten into a big fight about money and expenses for their apartment. He claimed that during the fight, he had told Shraddha that the relationship was over, and he told her to leave. He claimed that she had walked out of the house and took her mobile phone with her, but left all other personal belongings behind. After a couple of days he tried to call her, but her phone was off and that he hadn't spoken to her since. He told the officers that he assumed she had gone back to live with her parents in Mumbai. All of that might seem plausible, except when investigators looked back at the couple's phone and bank records, where they found that the last transaction was 54,000 rupee or £500 transfer from Shraddha's account to Aftab's account. This occurred 4 days after he claimed she left. The transfer had been made using a phone banking app, and the location of the phone at the time was the same area as the couple's apartment. There was also an Instagram conversation between Shraddha's account and a friend which took place on the 31st of May, and the location of the phone being the apartment as well. Things just weren't adding up. All of this information went against Aftab's claims that he had no contact with Shraddha after she walked out on the 22nd. If they hadn't been in touch, why had she transferred him money? And why was her phone being used from the apartment? When the investigators confronted Aftab to explain the evidence, he finally cracked. He told the officers that the part about the regular arguments was indeed true. He was getting sick of the fighting, but instead of Shraddha walking out, he had found another way to silence her for good. Aftab then admitted that Shraddha was dead, and that she had been for nearly 6 months. His new version of events goes as follows. On the 18th of May 2022, the couple had another violent fight. In a fit of rage, he strangled her to death. This of course left Aftab with the issue of what to do with her body, so he came up with a disturbing plan. The day after the murder, he went to a store and purchased a new refrigerator and a saw. He used a knife, scissors, a hammer and the saw to chop her body into 35 pieces small enough to fit inside his new refrigerator. But that is not the most gruesome aspect of his crime. Aftab was concerned that when he disposed of her body, somebody might be able to identify her. So he lit the kitchen stove, and he placed her face over the flames to burn off any traces of her identity. He told the police that the smell of her burning flesh was so horrific that he had to light incense day and night in an attempt to hide the odour. The following morning he bagged up a few pieces of Shraddha's body and took them to the Chatterpur forest, an area that spans hundreds of kilometres. He scattered the body parts around the bushes in hopes that wild animals would be attracted by the smell of fresh meat. But when he went back the next day, the pieces were exactly where he had left them, so Aftab came up with a new plan. A few days later he woke up at 2 a.m. and selected a few body parts from the refrigerator and put them into a bag. He went for a walk and dumped the remains in various drains and sewers around the city and in the forest. He repeated the same routine for every day for the next 18 days until every piece of Shraddha's body was gone. Despite telling officers that the murder had happened in a fit of rage, he finally admitted that he had actually been planning to kill her for more than a week before he went through with it. He is quoted as saying, "More than a week before the murder, I had made up my mind to kill Shraddha. Even on that day, she and I had a fight. I was determined to kill her when she suddenly became emotional and started crying, so I held back for later." He also admitted that during the relationship he would often sleep with other women and would do so behind Shraddha's back. Aftab said that the idea for the dismemberment had come from years of watching true crime and from hours of research looking up the best way to chop up a human body. After dismembering Shraddha, he would use strong chemicals which completely removed any trace of blood from the floor. Now this next bit is something that I actually find to be extremely disturbing. He told the investigators that her head was one of the last body parts he got rid of. He kept the head in the fridge in an upright position so he could talk to it, and sometimes when he was angry, he would slap the head. It's incredibly chilling to think about this image in your head. During the investigation, officers spoke to friends of the couple. Some of them had visited the apartment just days after the murder had taken place. They stated that Aftab seemed like his usual self, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. They were of course completely oblivious to their friend dismembered in the fridge. Aftab later admitted that when his new girlfriend visited, he would remove Shraddha's body parts from the refrigerator and put them on a shelf in the cupboard in case she looked inside the appliance. Only 10 pieces of Shraddha's body have ever been found, and all were found in the locations that Aftab had told the investigators to look. The remains were unidentifiable and were only matched using DNA. In a gruesome twist, the police had actually found a chopped head and a hand in June of 2022, just a month after Shraddha was murdered. It turned out that Aftab's attempts to conceal her identity by burning her face had worked, as the police were unable to identify the remains. The knife used to dismember her body has also never been recovered. Officers would later comment that Aftab showed no signs of remorse during his police interviews. Each night he slept peacefully in his cell, with no indication that he was haunted by the horror of what he had done. In a 2022 interview, Aftab allegedly stated that he will not feel guilty or ashamed if he is sentenced to hang, because he believes he will be honoured with a place in paradise. In July of 2023, the murder trial got underway. Shraddha's family demanded the death sentence in the case. Aftab pleaded not guilty to all of the charges against him, despite his earlier confession. More than 100 witnesses were called. At the time of this recording, no verdict has been delivered. However, it's likely that he will be found guilty and faces the death penalty.